So what am I supposed to do with you, Professor?
Hi, I want to talk about the Sunset Limited, but before I get into that, I have to talk a little bit about setting. Setting is an important part of any fictional work, and is often one that's taken for granted when looking at a work as a whole, considering the amount of impact it can have. It can establish the atmosphere and tone of a piece, give conflicts and characters context within their stories, and can establish the passage of time. Some are used to give us metaphorical insights into the heads of a character, while others might just add flavor, and occasionally they act as characters themselves, forming narrative foundations and playing a fundamental role in the shaping of characters. The use of setting can even be used to give us entirely new perspective on long-established works. In terms of storytelling, the backdrop on which events take place is often just as significant as the narrative itself, and in visual mediums, a big part of how these settings are established is through the art of scenography. So what is scenography? Boiling it down to its simplest definition, scenography is everything in a piece that helps establish atmosphere, mood, and a sense of place. It's composed of several elements, most notably set design, lighting, costuming, and sound design. If any of you have taken a film class before, you've probably come across the term mise en scène, and that's pretty similar, albeit a little bit more limited. It usually refers more to the visual theme of a piece than anything else, and it's pretty comparative to things like art direction and production design, and it's discussed in regards to film criticism more than any other medium. But it's only part of all of the things that work together to establish a setting. Film as a medium has always had the option of using established locations as stages, oftentimes with just minor alterations, like adding a few lights here and there or introducing furniture and props, but in theater, the set is always a constructed location. Thus, much of the study regarding scenography originates from theater. It's important to remember that advancements in art often emerge as the result of limitations placed on artists, and in the case of scenography, the limited space of the theater has led to some of the most interesting uses of the art. When you only have one stage to work with, one location from which you can express every important element of a piece, you can see how scenographers become extremely creative and skillful in the use of the tools at their disposal. But getting back to the point, what does all of this have to do with the Sunset Limited, and more importantly, what is the Sunset Limited? The Sunset Limited, written by Cormac McCarthy and premiering in 2006, is a small play that takes place following a professor's attempted suicide and gives us witness to the long conversation between he and the man who prevented it. In the impoverished New York City apartment of a religious man referred to only as Black by the script, the professor, named in the script as White, debates life, the world, and God as his rescuer tries to understand why he tried to kill himself and attempts to dissuade him from trying it again. In 2011, actor Tommy Lee Jones helmed a film adaptation of the work for HBO, co-starring Samuel L. Jackson. McCarthy's work is no stranger to screen adaptation, most recognizably in the Coen brothers' No Country for Old Men and 2009's The Road, but The Sunset Limited is a markedly different beast than the big-budget Hollywood affairs. Instead of grand expanses of plains and ruined locations, The Sunset Limited is set entirely in one room, and in the spirit of theater, uses it as an opportunity to fill every crevice with detail and meaning, and is a great example of scenography at work. Now, just so you know, this analysis includes spoilers of the entirety of The Sunset Limited, as a fair warning to anyone who cares. If you do, feel free to pause the video and come back after watching it. Starting off, let's go back to the elements of scenography I talked about before, starting with the most obvious and most pronounced: set design. On a practical level, the sets for The Sunset Limited were built to achieve a very important aspect of cinematography: coverage, which is the process of capturing a scene in a variety of ways. Different angles, different shot sizes, etc. And this is usually done for effect. Coverage is one of the key differences between how we view plays and how we view films. Though both are technically viewed from a static perspective in the end, film has the ability to provide us with viewpoints that normally we would lack. Let me put it this way: the viewing of a stage play is kind of like watching an entire film shot in a master, which is a wide shot that covers the entire scene, which, if you're not trying for something avant-garde and borderline unwatchable, is something that has to be addressed in any film adaptation of a stage play. It becomes much trickier to force perspective and hide limitations when a scene has to be covered from so many different directions, and scenographers have to think about the entirety of the 3D space in order to maintain the illusion. The set of The Sunset Limited shares a lot in common with a standard studio set, with each wall built to be able to break away from the set as a whole at any time, giving the camera and crew room to maneuver and film from any angle that might be required of them. Though losing the objective perspective a proscenium might provide while doing this, the space itself in The Sunset Limited makes up for it with a sense of intimacy and effectively conveys just how small Black's apartment really is, especially in the eyes of someone as well off as the professor.
How long have you been here?
Oh, 6, going on 7 years.
I don't understand why you live here.
As opposed to where?
Anywhere.
This pretty much is anywhere. I got my bedroom over yonder where I can get away.
Got a sofa where folk can crash, junkies and crackheads mostly. Of course, they're gonna walk off with all your portables, so you can't own nothing. But that's good. You hang out with the right crowd, you pretty much get over all your worldly cravings. Only thing I miss is the music. I aim to get me a steel dough. Then I can have me some music again.
What he can keep is much like him, old and well-worn. His sink, stove, and refrigerators are scuffed and discolored from years of grime and abuse. Every one of his pots and pans look to be at least a few decades old, down to the coffee percolator he owns, which haven't been common since the early 70s, as far as I can tell. The wood on his doors is weathered and chipped, and his windows are filthy. Even his Bible, perhaps his most prized possession, looks to be bordering on a state of disrepair. And yet, despite those things, the apartment practically glows with color. The couch and chair are vibrant shades of red and blue respectively, faded greens can be seen in the tile, and the table they sit at is almost golden brown against the dusty and dirty walls. It's a surprisingly powerful move to juxtapose these elements together, and it all comes together to echo Black's life and inner conflicts. Throughout the film, he talks about his rough history, being locked up and fighting near to death in prison, barely having a penny to his name, and coming to Christianity in an hour of desperation. He lives almost Christ-like, or Zen-like, simple yet happy with his surroundings. It's a place that should be awful, but it seems surprisingly pleasant, down to the soft lights that drift in from apartment windows across the way. In its simplicity, it's almost like the urban version of a small country house, an escape from everything White knows where he can clear his mind and be at peace, at least a little bit. Like the warming soul food they share later on in the film, this uncomfortable place seems to be quite a comfort for White throughout most of the film, and seems to be a reflection of how Black sees his environment, and it's a surprisingly optimistic view of it. That optimistic perspective is one thing to note about the set design. Though sparse and small, and a little bit grimy, it never feels claustrophobic or even particularly ugly. It also allows for a sense of balance that effectively makes it a neutral visual space, a balance of pleasant and unpleasant where the blocking of characters and the movement of the camera are the things that dictate tension and comfort for the viewer.
I just fixed this last night. We gotta heat it up a few times and get the flavors right.
Like chili
Like chili, yeah, that's right. You know where I learned to fix this?
in Louisiana.
Right here in the ghettos in New York City. There's a lot of different influences in a dish like this.
Looking at the front door, we also see that it's covered with a huge amount of locks. It's a pretty grim image whenever we catch sight of it, one that's usually associated with keeping something unpleasant out and sometimes keeping something in. One of the recurring motifs in the Sunset Limited is the character White getting up and trying to leave, and getting pulled back into conversation by Black, desperate to keep him away from the outside world until he's sure that he won't try to kill himself again.
I've got to go. Well, I've got to go. I've got to go. I'm very tired. I've got to go. I think I better go. I have to go.
I should go.
The use of locks and the subsequent unlocking of them at the end serves to visually underline not only the desires of Black and the feeling of peaceful isolation from White, but also their power dynamic. Throughout the entire film, Black maintains strict control over the environment and holds essentially all the power in their conversation. When asked questions, White is compelled to answer, but when White asks questions, Black is not so much compelled to answer as he gifts his answers. He freely dismisses questions he doesn't want to answer, and in cases such as his jailhouse story, information about himself and his life are framed almost as if White is lucky to be receiving this information. He is the one who's able to command White to keep coming back every time he tries to leave, and it seems as though White is obligated to cooperate with the conversation, as if he owes Black some sort of debt for saving his life. However, at the conclusion of the film, when the power dynamic flips and White gains control of the conversation, we see Black not only unable to prevent White from getting close to the door, but in the end, also unlocking it for him, allowing him to finally open the door and leave. The focus on the world inside versus the world outside is a prominent part of the film as a whole, underlying the central conflict dissuading the professor's suicide, as well as how both of the characters view each of these worlds, one that's continued and expanded upon in how the film is lit.
I don't think I'm special.
You don't?
No, I don't.
You don't think you view those other commuters from a certain height?
I view those other commuters as fellow occupants of the same abyssal pit in which I find myself, and if they see it as something different, I don't know how that makes me special.
The lighting in the Sunset Limited generally stays pretty soft and neutral throughout the majority of the film, with a few exceptions. The warm fluorescents accentuate a feeling of age in the set, but are pleasing on the skin and eyes of our characters. In the background, some harsher yellowish-green bulbs hinted an ugliness behind everything. Hints of orange and later blue light coming through the windows teases that out there, things might not be quite the same as they are in here. Whenever the two characters discuss the outside, we see their different perspectives on it. White sees the outside world as awful and unworthy of saving, kind of like himself.
I don't see how you can live here. I don't know how you can feel safe.
Well, you got a point, Professor, about being safe anyway.
You ever stopped any of these people from taking drugs?
Not that I know of.
Then what is the point? I don't get it. I mean, it's hopeless. This place is a moral leper colony.
Damn. Moral leper colony. Where my pencil at?
I still don't see how you can live here. Why not go someplace where you can do the world some good?
As opposed to someplace where good is needed?
Whenever we find him staring out the window, bathed in light from outside, it's in a moment of disdain for the world out there. Black, on the other hand, claims to have an optimistic perspective, one that we see reflected indoors, but we rarely see him peek his head outside to view it for himself. In the final shot of the film, we see the sun rising over the tops of buildings, metaphorically confronting Black with the world out there, revealed in all its ugliness, after he's confronted with the possibility that there was nothing he could do to truly change White's nature, casting doubt into everything he's done with his life, and yet he refuses to look out the window as its light is cast over him.
You always put your coat on like that?
What's wrong with the way I put my coat on?
I ain't saying nothing was wrong with it. I'm just asking if that's your regular method.
I don't have a regular method. I just put it on.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, effeminate? What?
I'm just studying the ways of professors.
As for costuming, the juxtaposition between the two characters can be blatantly seen. White dresses in comfortable and modern clothing, prominently featuring red, a color often associated with strong emotions and violence. He stands out distinctly from the aged environment he finds himself in, appearing almost anachronistic, whereas Black, dressed in blue work clothes, matches the oldness and plainness of his surroundings entirely, and gives off this order of calm and collectedness.
Look, suppose I were to give you my word that I would just go home and I wouldn't try to kill myself en route.
Suppose I was to give you my word that I wouldn't listen to none of your bullshit.
Finally, on top of everything, the sound design makes the world these characters inhabit feel on the edge of unsafe throughout parts of the film. Outside, large dogs bark and police sirens ring out from time to time, mingling with car alarms. Shouting can be heard in neighboring apartments, and thunder rumbles occasionally at moments of conflict, preceding a torrent of rain. These sounds emphasize the unpleasant parts of the outside world creeping into the space of the apartment. As the film goes on, these sounds meld into a constant that you barely hear after a while. This particularly highlights the horrors the outside world have as they reassert themselves on White's mind. And lastly, there's the small and quiet soundtrack that sinks occasionally into the mix, softly underscoring certain moments within the story, appearing so rarely and subtly that you often don't notice it until it's at its height or until it's gone.
Don't you want to be happy?
Happy?
What? You got something against being happy?
Happy?
What? Like there ain't no such thing? Not for nobody?
No.
Though it's rarely flashy, and with less bravado than the ambitious scenography of theatrical adaptations like Death of a Salesman, The Sunset Limited's subtle and subdued use of scenography really elevates it beyond the limitations such a project usually has, expanding on the piece and constructing a meaningful setting only glimpsed at in the words of McCarthy's script. And I hope it's been a good primer for anyone trying to understand the importance of the art itself. For a completely different perspective on the subject, I highly recommend Cardboard Computer's GDC talk about the use of scenography within their game, Kentucky Route Zero. There will be a link to that in the description, and not only is it an interesting window into the development of a fantastic game, but it also shows how scenography can be practically applied to projects other than film and theater. And finally, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this. If it's been your cup of tea, be sure to subscribe and think about sharing it, because there's probably going to be more of these coming down the pipeline if this goes well enough, and let me know in the comments if you've got any thoughts or feedback. I'll see you next time.